Every year, thousands of people die on the roads of America and millions get injured. That's why safety is very important for everyone. Today we're going to talk about it with Nataly Stoyanova from Cellex Consulting Group. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Stan.
For how long have you been involved with the trucking industry?
Basically all my life, but as a consultant since 2005, working with trucking companies somewhere maybe in 1999.
How big and important is this industry for the economy of America?
It's one of the biggest industry. Trucks move about 70% of the freight in the United States, which accounts for $727 billion in gross revenue for the trucking companies.
Being on the road seems to be one of the most dangerous activities in the United States. Do you know roughly how many people died in 2016 in auto accidents?
Yes, you are right. By statistics, 40,000 people have died in the year 2016, which is a jump of 6% from the year 2015 and a 14% increase from the year 2014.
So it seems like it's a trend.
Yes, it's trending up, and it's very sad, and 4.6 million people actually have been injured in vehicle accidents.
You are working specifically in tracking safety. How many types of safety areas can you define?
Well, safety is very large, and each different type of carrier has its own safety, but one of the most important safety is the one that it's on the road and the one that it's in the office. Truck drivers as well as office employees need to be educated on to road safety and what one is doing and what the other one is doing, because dispatchers need to understand truckers and truckers need to understand the dispatchers.
When you're a truck company owner, you are operating in a very risky and over-regulated environment. A great number of those risks are in the safety area. How can you successfully manage them?
Well, it's actually very easy. You have to be consistent. You shouldn't break the rules. And you have to try to educate your drivers as much as possible. You have to hold safety seminars with your drivers. You have to assess their behavior on the road. There are a lot of tools that are out there right now for companies to use in order to determine their drivers' behavior on the road.
But based on your experience, how can you assess the level of education and preparedness of CDL drivers as far as safety is concerned?
Well, sadly, drivers are not as well as educated as we might want them to be. It's not that hard to get a CDL license. And each company needs to understand that a driver that comes out of a CDL school needs more schooling. He needs to be teamed up with another driver who's been on the roads for several years, who has the experience and is willing to coach and train this new driver. A lot of company owners make the mistake of putting brand new drivers behind the wheels, and this is when one of the most horrific accidents happen, just because of lack of education and lack of experience for that driver. Getting a CDL from DMV does not make you a commercial driver. It does not give you the experience. It doesn't give you the knowledge. It doesn't teach you how to respond in the different situations. The only way you can learn something like that is on the road with a much more experienced person than you.
And also to attend some specific training.
Absolutely,
classes.
Training is also very important. A trainer or a teacher at a classroom can show the different situations that a trucker can endure during his trip. We can explain to them what they can do in order to be safe on the roads. We can explain the rules of the roads for all the drivers. As you know, we live in a very, very large country, and we have many states, and each one of them has different laws that our truckers are supposed to follow, but how would they follow a law that they've never heard of?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Do truck company owners really recognize safety as their top priority?
Sadly, from my experience and what I've seen, no. Truck company owners invest a lot more in their dispatch departments and their accounting departments. They hire a lot more people to run the dispatch and to run accounting, but not as many to run safety. Safety becomes a priority once Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration or
Is
department.
this across the board, or are you talking about certain carriers?
Well, it's across the board up until a bad experience happens.
Okay.
Up until they get audited with a compliance review, or up until a fatality has happened. And this is when owners learn how much an unsafe company can cost them.
Well, what are your personal recommendations for CDL driver safety education and training?
Well, number one thing that they need to learn is how to be safe on the roads based on the rules of the roads. Number two, they should never use any electronic devices while driving. They should keep their eyes
Anything
on
that
the road.
distracts them.
Absolutely. Every distraction could cause a fatality, because accident happens in a split second. If I tie your eyes right now and have you walk from here to there, you will bump into something. That's exactly what happens when you are driving while looking at your phone. And this is when people die.
Yeah. What are the major safety risks in the trucking company internal operations?
Internally, number one thing is you cannot control the drivers while they're inside the truck. So if you did not prepare those drivers, if you didn't educate them enough, there is no impact that you can have on them. But in order for you to educate them, you have to be educated. And what I see as a trend is trucking company hiring people who does not understand safety at all, and they learn as they go, which might not be a bad thing if we're doing something a lot safer than trucking, but in trucking that can cause the fatality. Also, the dispatchers that dispatch those trucks, and I understand that they care about their freight and they care about their brokers and they care about their freight being delivered on time, but they also need to understand the rules. So they also need to be trained, and they need to know how many available hours their drivers have based on their hours of service, and when can they deliver a freight. They should understand what the speed limits are, and that not all trucks and all drivers can be on time just based on the regulations. So it's very important for each department to be educated on the safety standpoint and to understand what the safety department is doing and what the goals are and what is safe and what is unsafe for that driver that is on the road.
There are some special carriers, like hazardous materials carriers. Do they need to make extra efforts in the safety area?
Absolutely. By regulations, hazardous material carriers, first off, they need a lot more training for their drivers. Also, there is mandatory hazmat training, which each driver has to undergo before he can go into the truck that belongs to that company and start driving. They need to understand about load securement. They need to understand how to handle each different type of hazardous material. Also, everybody that deals with hazmat has to be educated, with hazmat, has to be educated with all the OSHA regulations and all the FMCSA regulations.
I know you have a Facebook page, your company Cellex Consulting Group, and recently I saw you shared an information that there is a warning that hazardous materials carriers, their trucks, semi-tracks, can be used even for terrorist attacks.
Absolutely. FMCSA issued a warning for all trucking companies, not just hazardous. Every single trucking company that a truck might be stolen and might be used for a terrorist attacks based on what is happening.
We had some examples in Europe as far as I
Yes, based on what is happening in Europe. But now imagine this then. We have an 80,000-pound vehicle that is deadly on its own. Now imagine if that vehicle has 45,000 pounds worth of poison in the back.
Yeah, that's even
or explosives.
A federal regulation on electronic logbooks will be in effect later this year. How will this impact the tracking companies?
It will shake the trucking industry. It will shake it because it's something new. But at the same time, it's the same.
Is it new?
Well, it will be new for a lot of truckers and a lot of companies that are still using paper logs.
Okay.
It will be different. Drivers would need a little bit of training on how to use those electronic devices. It will hopefully prevent truckers from cheating on their hours, but at the same time, it will also prevent shippers from keeping those trucks for numerous hours for loading and unloading, and for asking them to be at the deliveries at unreasonable amount of time. So hopefully it will be good, or it will make companies...
So it's a double-edged sword.
Absolutely. It might make companies hire a lot more teams than they're hiring at the moment.
What is the difference between ELD and EOBR?
ELDs, it's something called electronic onboard device, which can be something like your cell phone. There is a software that you can upload on it, and you can put it on your dashboard, and it will track you based on the GPS that your cell phone has. EOBRs, on the other hand, are electronic onboard recorders, which was referenced by FMCSA, which is now changed to AOBRDs, which is automatic onboard recording device, which is installed in the engine of your truck and records every movement your truck makes. So unlike your cell phone that you can turn off at any time you like, this little machine cannot be turned off because it's mounted.
That's a substantial difference.
Absolutely. It's mounted to an engine, and it gets its information from the engine of the truck. So it knows every time this truck moves, it records its movement.
How important is to understand what contracts you sign in the trucking industry?
It's very important because every company has its own contracts, its own rules that are in-house rules that they have created for the people working for them. And sometimes, especially owner-operators, they go head first without even reading those contracts. And when time passes and they receive their first paycheck,
They think that these are standard forms.
nothing is standard. In the transportation industry, there is no standard contract. Everybody and every company is allowed to have their own. Some pay a percentage, others pay per mile, third have set agreements per week. Each company has a different amount for insurance. So it's not something standard. It's very important for you to read before you sign. Just like with any other contract, you have to read it, you have to understand it, and if there is anything that you don't understand there, you should ask questions. You should
Consult.
Absolutely consult, ask them to explain it to you. Do not put your signature on something you don't understand. There are a lot of companies that sublease their equipment to drivers, but the driver do not understand their contracts, do not understand their monthly or weekly payments, depending on how is it made, their insurance payments, their IFTA payments, and then at the end of the month, instead of making money, they end up owing money to that company, and that's how they end up without having a truck anymore.
What can adversely affect the status of a CDO in different states, and how can the safety department prevent this from happening?
Well, different states have different rules, but what I've seen from my experience, number one problem is child support.
Child support?
Absolutely. When you don't pay your child support and your spouse or ex-spouse rather reports you, your CDL is suspended immediately. So this is number one thing. So what I suggest for each safety personnel is when they hire a driver, one of the questions should be, are you paying child support? And knowing that this driver is paying child support, they should check his MVR records more often. Next important thing is tickets. Each state has different points that they assigned for tickets on the road. So every driver, just like the safety, needs to watch for those points. and check MVRs constantly to make sure that everybody is okay and their licenses are not suspended. And number three thing that I've seen happening from the past few years is medical cards. A lot of drivers, when they renew their medical cards, they usually do it in a different state than the one that issued their CDL, just because they were there at the moment. And then they are required to send or fax or mail or email a copy of their medical card to DMV of that issuing state. And sometimes they do, but unfortunately DMV did not receive it. So immediately as the old medical card expires, they don't have the new one, so they suspend their license or downgrade their license to a driver's license, to a regular license. So every time you have a driver who is renewing his medical card, I would suggest you call DMV and make sure that they have received a copy of his new card and they have linked it to his CDL. This way you prevent having a driver with a downgraded license on the street.
How important are semi-track accessories like speed governor, in-cabin cameras, recording equipment, etc. for the tracker and the tracking company?
Very important, Stan. Imagine a situation where you drive a truck and somebody cuts you off and you hit him from behind. If you have a camera, you have proof of that. You have a proof that
Is it mandatory to have it, basically?
No, it isn't, but it's a good thing to have. A recording device on your truck can help you in court. It can help you due to insurance matters. It might even keep you out of jail. Having a governor on the truck, restraining the speed of that truck, it's also very good, because you know sometimes when you drive.
How does it work?
It's very easy. You can set it up to whatever speed you want that truck to go the most. Let's say the highest speed limit is 75 in the state, so you can raise it up to 75. And as you know, sometimes when you drive your car long distance and you listen to music and your foot kind of gets heavy and it steps on the pedal, and all of a sudden you look at your dashboard and you're at 100.
It can go over.
Absolutely. When you have a governor, that cannot happen.
Well, that's great. Truck company owners, like all entrepreneurs, are looking for savings. Where can they make them?
Well, the best place to save is your safety department, because when you have good safety, you have cheap insurance. When you have good safety, good brokers give you good loads. When your safety is shut, then your insurance is very expensive. A lot of brokers don't want to work with you just because you weren't safe. And when you have good safety, you have a better peace of mind. You feel a lot better, you sleep better at night. Because when you understand how important safety is and how much money you can save from safety, you will see that paying that extra salary doesn't sound all that bad right now. The fees from FMCSA and Department of Transportation are rising every year, and one audit can bring a company to a bankruptcy. Basically, the way the fees work with FMCSA, they are based on gross revenue. It's a percentage of your gross revenue that can grow very fast with each violation that they find. With Department of Transportation, it's fairly almost the same thing. So in my suggestion, look at your safety first and invest in people, invest in educated people, and try to get rid of every bad driver that you have out there, because one bad driver can cost you your whole company.
Thank you, Nataly.
You're welcome.